Welcome to Life List, a birding podcast.
Hello. Welcome, everyone. This is Life List, a birding podcast. I am George Armistead, your co-host with Alvaro Jaramillo and Mollee Brown. We also have our good buddy and guest host today, Alex Harper, hailing from Las Vegas, Nevada. Alex, how are you doing today?
It is. It's warm over here. We just had a couple good days for migratory songbirds, but I'm avoiding the heat right now and a little bit of wind, getting a little bit of office work done, but generally in good spirits, traveling a little bit, and very excited to be on the podcast, playing kind of guest host. Looking forward to asking you all a couple questions about guiding today. So Thank you, and excited to be here. How are you?
Excellent. Looking forward to having the tables turned a little bit here. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, we haven't officially done this before, so it'll be fun.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm here.
This is rare, by the way. I think this is the first time that the three of us are all back at home. Well, actually, Molly's not home. That's right.
I'm not home. No.
Yeah, that is
but
not
we're all
your
here
cabin.
on the recording stuff.
Yeah, for the first time since like January or something. So
yeah,
it's kind of crazy. But yeah, I think we should dive right in here. We've got a really fun topic today, I think. This is a good one, Alex. You came up with this, asking us if we might want to do something on guiding and how people get into it, the different types of guiding, what makes a good guide. And these are questions that come up a lot, I feel like, within our listenership, but certainly beyond. And when you said this, I was like, yes, we need to do this because, I think all of us get inquiries from other folks that are interested in, in getting into guiding or just wondering how it works and how it doesn't work also. So thanks for bringing us together to have this conversation, Alex.
Hey, it sounds like the stars really aligned here for all three of you to be present. And, one thing that came to mind as we were talking about this topic, George, is that to actually have all three of you come and be able to make this was unlikely because it seems like the three of you are fitting this podcast in between all of your schedules, which of course are different. You're somewhere else in the country for days, oftentimes weeks at a time, and you're all moving targets. So we're definitely lucky to be able to do this. And we were actually texting while I was on a trip, you were on a trip, about these types of topics. And I realize that a lot of us that end up guiding or that want to guide just kind of fall into it. I think a lot of us just look for ways that allow us to travel and see new birds, see new destinations, or even get to see some of the same birds over and over and over, sometimes on an annual basis. But I know that I kind of stumbled into it a little bit. I had no intention of being a naturalist guide or bird guide. So I'm kind of curious to just start here. I want to hear about how you all got into it and tell me in just a few sentences, what was the first time that somebody hired you to go find them a bird or birds? Where was it? And what were you expecting when you did it that might be a little different from what you might think of it now? So I'm just going to look across the screen here and pick Alvaro to start us off with that. Alvaro, what was the first time, or when was the first time you were given money to show people birds?
Birding for hire. See, it. I think it was. Yeah, it's definitely when I was in Vancouver, and I was a student, and I was actually teaching classes on birding. And one of my students said, "Hey, I want to start a bird watching company," and he didn't quite have the right idea of like what to do. He thought you could do a full scale birding company by just visiting Vancouver and the nearby areas. And I said, no, like you're going to have to expand. And he said, well, you want to start guiding these trips? And I said, sure. And I started guiding these trips for him. And that company is still active. It's Eagle Eye Tours. So I was the first guide and probably started, in a sense, all of the first ideas of touring in that company. Different owner now, totally different. But yeah, that was what happened.
Oh,
Wow.
did you say that was your student who came up with that idea?
Yeah, it was. He was at like. I mean, the students were older than I was, so but they were like
Yeah.
birding class students, and he just wanted to get
Oh,
into
I
this
see.
as
I see.
yeah, yeah. So it's sort of he was kind of on the retiring end of things, but he wanted to do some kind of small business regarding birding, and he started that company. So yeah,
Wow. Still around today.
yeah.
Still doing trips in Canada, I believe.
Oh,
Super
all
cool.
over the world, actually.
All over
Yeah,
the world. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
How about you, Molly?
Whoa, that's pretty cool. That's
Hmm.
that's not just guiding, that's a whole business. Well, I will to give the shortest possible answer. I got connected to the greater birding community when I was in college in Ohio, and there was a job posting for Birdwatchers Digest magazine. It was a marketing internship, and I quit waitressing in college to start at Birdwatchers Digest purely because I liked birdwatching, not because I had even a marketing background at that point. But um, Birdwatchers Digest did these essentially reader tours called Reader Rendezvous at the time. This was 11 years ago. And for the next one that came up, when I was very much just the college student doing very interny things, one of the staff members that was supposed to guide for it couldn't attend at last minute. And I feel like I was just naive and didn't really realize how much I was signing up for when I was like, I'll go. I don't mind missing some classes to go hang out in Florida and look at birds and talk to other people, and I can drive a van and I can carry suitcases and whatever. So I went down as one of maybe 6 or so. There were a lot of us guiding in a pretty big group, like 40 people or so. And I've been back to this spot a lot, but I can remember the moment where I was at Orlando Wetlands with this big group of folks in Florida, and everybody was looking at, I think, like a yellow warbler one way. And I turned around and I looked the other way and I saw a yellow throated warbler and kind of waited till everyone saw that. And I was like, hey, now we can look over here. And like that moment was like, ooh, this is kind of fun to not just look at birds with people, but to kind of plan out the experience for them. And that was how I got started guiding trips. And yeah, it's been a roundabout trip or path to get to where I'm doing that full time now. But that's how I started.
Wow. So this was kind of like a volunteer position, a way for you to be able to get down to Florida and do some birding. And then along the way, you realize like you could do more of this. Like you found it a lot
Yeah.
of fun. And then, yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah, it wasn't like based on a desire to travel or even to like to see more birds. It was actually I just jumped in because I just said yes to whatever at that point, which served me well looking back. But the crafting of an experience is honestly what really has got me hooked on it.
So even then, crafting an experience was like more of an appeal than listing birds or finding people new birds. Was it like the whole thing? It sounds like
Yeah,
the
it really
logistical and
was.
planning it. Ah,
Yeah, I didn't know global birding and listing well enough to even consider it from those other perspectives at
Yeah.
that point. I didn't know what birding was like on a big scale. I wasn't really connected to a birding community before those few months. So it was all just a totally new world to me and not what I was considering for my career at all. And it wasn't what I was considering full time until really after the pandemic. I've guided a little bit off and on since then, and then I've done a lot more in the past 5 years. Um, So I know a lot more now about birding culture than I did then, and it's changed a lot. But yeah, it was just that whole experience that got me kind of hooked from the beginning.
I kind of feel like that's sort of like an outlier experience too. Most
Hmm.
people very much an idea of what it's like, and then put themselves in a position to do that. But you just kind of said yes to something different and intriguing and went for it. That's super cool.
Basically, yeah, I had the passion for birding, and then it was just a total, one thing after another, just based on all these chance encounters that I've had in my
Mhm.
life, honestly.
Wow, cool. Thanks for sharing that. All right, George, you're up, man. How did you end up guiding your first time?
Yeah, I got asked to kind of jump on as like I think I was like, I want to say I was like a second leader, which is crazy to think because it was a dry Tortugas trip, and I think there was 50 people on this boat. Um, it was like the old Yankee Freedom that used to go out to Fort Jefferson, and man, the sleeping quarters were tight. I remember it's like inches above your face before the bunk above you. But basically they were, I was young, I was 23 or something at the time, maybe 24. I don't remember exactly, but I was pretty much wrapping up grad school and at Penn here. And I thought I was going to go on and do like environmental consulting. That's really what I was thinking I was going to end doing. I was going to be in environmental consulting, and this opportunity came up and I was like, cool, well, I'll do this before I go on to be, an environmental consultant. And then, and yeah. And I, I remember finding the black knotties. Like that was the thing where I remember being like, getting people on black knotties because there's sort of a sea of brown knotties there, and you got to find the one or two, maybe three black knotties. Sometimes there's like zero, but we had one, and I just remember like vibing on that, like picking it out, being able to describe to people where it was. And then that was a tour I ended up doing 7 or 8, maybe 9 times eventually. But that was my first real tour that I helped out on. And really, I was just charged with birding and showing people birds and making sure they got the birds they wanted to see. And I loved that, because I'm a social animal. So, and later that year, I ended up doing one more tour, and I guess a couple more tours, including one with Alvaro to Oregon. And that was kind of a trip that really set me on a whole new path. And then it was kind of after that, I was like, wow, I might really actually make a living at this. This isn't a one-off before I go on and have my normal job. This might actually be my job. Like, to me, growing up, my father's a birder, knew a lot of people in this business. Those guys were pros at a level that I would never achieve. I would never do what they were doing. In my view, they were like, Major League Baseball players or something. They played for the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Phillies, and I was going to be never even in that sphere. But eventually, it just one opportunity presented itself after another, and that's how it kind of got started for me.
And you're still doing it, and all three of you are still doing it, but there are so many different types of ways to guide. And I've done a couple different types of guiding myself, but I know that you guys you all are doing this professionally. And some types of tours might be fairly challenging and intense, and then some might be a little bit more easygoing. But I would love to know from you all, what is your favorite type of environment and tour structure to do? And those structures can include pelagic birding, like this can be a day trip, multi-day trip. I have the feeling that that's going to be a number one for at least some of you here. Then there's also like your multi-day trips that are international, multiple hotels, maybe multiple airports. Then there are also the more like local, specialty-based types of birding tours. And then there are some that are ship-based, where you're traveling solely on a ship for maybe days or even weeks at a time. I would love to know which ones you think are the most fun or interesting or challenging to do. I'll give you a second to think, but while you're thinking, I'll just kind of say that for me, the environment I think is the most challenging is uh, guiding or finding birds in a tropical rainforest. I have not been to Africa, but birding in the neotropics and the Amazon is probably the most um, sensory, the biggest sensory experience, I think, as far as birds go, but also just really difficult. So, yeah, what do you all think? I'll start with George here. George, what's your favorite type of birding, and where do you find it most challenging?
Tough question to answer, I would say, because I've kind of, a friend of mine used to say she would say I'm a mile wide and an inch deep, and I feel that is true of me to some degree. I really kind of like all of it. I don't have a favorite particular type of tour. I've done a lot of safari tours. I love those. The ship-based trips are great also. I just did kind of, a hardcore birding trip, in India that was, pretty hardcore. And this one, we went up into Arunachal Pradesh, which reminded me of, as Mollee and I were talking about with Jason Hall, that reminded me of kind of birding in the Andes. Each of those provides me something different as a guide. It scratches a different itch. I don't think I can really choose a favorite. I would say the ship-based trips are nice because they are simplified from a logistical perspective. Your ship is your hotel, your restaurant, your vehicle. That is nice because it just simplifies things, just makes things easier. It means that you actually have more time on your hands a lot of the time to do simple things like go to the bathroom. So those are really nice. I really like those. I don't have a favorite. In terms of the most challenging, I think that honestly, some of the hardcore birding trips are more challenging. And pelagic birding, like those, even the single day trips, especially the ones that start in the middle of the night for us, you're not looking at a lot of comfort there. Those are, I always say pelagic birding is the hardest kind there is because the birds are moving, they're unfamiliar, they can be distant, they are studies in black, white, gray, brown, and you're moving, you're on a boat that's moving, the light can be challenging, there's not a lot of landmarks by which to describe where a bird is. So I think that's a challenging kind of birding. It's one of my favorite kinds. Obviously, we talk about it a lot, but even still, some of the hardcore birding trips that go 2 weeks or more, those can wear folks down. And because you tend to be on the move, one night here, 2 nights there, one night here, and you're dealing with logistics because of that are a challenge, and also, those trips, especially in the mountains in the Andes or the Himalayas, you're dealing with a diverse group of birds. You're dealing with a lot of species trying to get all that stuff. So I would say pelagic birding and those trips in the Andes in particular, those are challenging trips. Yeah.
They're super difficult, but for different reasons, right? Like with the pelagic birding, you miss a bird that goes by, you don't really have any second chances. Whereas you might have multiple days in the right type of habitat in India, and you have different chances to see the same species potentially in different locations if you're in the appropriate habitat. But boy, those can really wear you down, huh? Like I kind of feel like the sweet spot is 2 weeks, but after 2 weeks for something like that, it's really difficult to show up every morning the same person as you were when you first began. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think that's true.
What do you think, Alvaro? What are you thinking here for your answers?
I don't think I have a favorite type of tour. It's probably the opposite. I have tours I don't want to do. It's like, so I think if you really categorically identify what is hardcore birding tours, I don't do any hardcore birding tours. Like in the way that some of the companies that specialize in very specific rarities and so forth. We do tours that are like an exploration and actually sort of a big diversity of birds with diversity of other things. But I tend to not. I try not to have the other things fall by the wayside because we want to see a lot of birds. So I would rather have a tour that has moderate to good comfort in where you're staying, good food, all of those things. I'm not keen on I don't want to say lowering the standards, but um, you know, taken away some of those things in order to see one specific or two specific rare birds somewhere. So, and the reason is I used to do that kind of touring, and I found it to be really, it's not as much fun as it sounds like. I mean, we all want to see rare birds. We all want to see um, good stuff, and and we do. But sometimes you have to put in like an extra 30% on a tour hardcore trip to see maybe less than 5% more birds. So I would rather do a trip that doesn't see those extra, whatever they might be, and has a maximal kind of level of food comfort and other things going on. Now it's not always available in the, uh, you know, I've done amazing trips to West Texas where the food was sometimes not the best. It's like, it's
Mm-hmm.
like there's some
Mm-hmm.
places where you go, you're in a little town, middle nowhere, and the coffee is sort of lukewarm and sort of moderately pale looking. And you're like, oh boy, and sometimes it's just not available. But I would say I would rather not do the trips where yeah, we are kind of truly hardcore birding. And like George says, the ship-based trips are kind of awesome in that you are in your floating hotel and people sometimes are like, I'm tired. I'm going to take off. I don't need to sit out here watching for some rare petrel. You guys do that. Let me know tomorrow if you see it. Um, and that's fine. And I would love for every trip to have that option where somebody could just say, you know what, this is about the time I want to have a cocktail and I don't want to look another hour for something. And often you're in a van or bus-based trip, you don't have that option. You just have to wait it out. So that's the ship-based tours are great for that. Anyway.
That's a great answer. And Alvaro, it makes me think of something else. Do you think for anyone who is thinking about doing a multi-day tour that thinks I'm going to go enjoy myself and see a new country and see a bunch of birds, do you think that they sh- that they may overestimate just how exhausting trips can be when it's very target focused and you're looking for endemics that might be, for example, that might be quite far away? What advice would you give to that person?
Boy, so I think there's a little bit of research that sometimes is necessary, right? Like I sometimes people say to me like, why don't you do a trip to the Philippines? And I'm like, to me, the Philippines, I would love to go there. I would love to sample the Philippines, but the classic Philippines tours are moving around into these little islands, long hikes up, rugged kind of terrain, really early mornings. And I don't think people realize that some trips just are that way. And when they're asking about going to the Philippines, they're basically asking, I want to go on a hardcore trip, or maybe I'm misunderstanding, and they're asking, are you able to make a Philippines trip that is actually doable for the average birder and would be fun? Because really hardcore trips for a lot of birders are not going to be fun. They're going to be amazing for a group of birders, going to be hell for another group of birders, and we've encountered that in probably more so in the past when sort of everything was geared to the hardcore, and a lot of people just wanted to go birding, and they didn't have a choice to go on a trip that was, a little bit lower. And I don't want to call it low key either, because the trips we do are still tiring. It's
Yes.
just, you know, they're just they're just balanced in a different way. The set point's a little different. So I don't know if I answered the
Yeah,
question, but
I think you did. Yeah, I think it's the sweet spot is to balance, obviously, uh, the biodiversity that you're there for to really sample it with staying in just a few areas over the course of a week or 10 days. I think like that's the sweet spot that I hear from people. They might like something that's a week or more, but aren't necessarily looking to wake up, pack up, and go to a new location and stay in a new hotel every 1 or 2 nights. And I think that people sometimes overlook that's what it takes to clean up, quote unquote. So yeah, that's a great answer. And Molly, I'd love to know from you what's do you have a preference, or do you have a trip that you just try to avoid at all costs?
Yeah, I mean, I can build off of what y'all have been saying. We're definitely not a group of guides who are listing heavy, I guess I would say. And in thinking about the types of trips that I like to lead the most, in a sort of atypical answer, maybe I think the types that I like are the types where everybody leaves feeling like they have gained a sense of place where we were. I
Mm.
think that's what really gets me about, that I dislike about a trip where you're seeing as many species of birds as you possibly can. And I think, Alvaro, kind of building on what you were saying, I don't want to say it's a pet peeve, but I feel like I often have to say if we're doing a slower pace or not switching hotels every night on a trip or something, it doesn't mean we're birding less. I would argue that we're probably birding more and spending more time in the field and probably getting to know the birds and general ecology even better than if we're going at a breakneck pace. And if that results in a fewer species, well, that's what I'm aiming for on trips is, to immerse ourselves where we are. And it's not just about birds. It's about nature as a whole. It's how everything overlaps, and it is about culture and people and human presence wherever we are too. I was thinking about two different ways that I kind of categorize a lot of the tours that I do in my head. Um, and what you were saying, Alex, about how tours are challenging in kind of the most biodiverse parts of like the neotropics and those sort of areas. That's something that's really been changing in my head as well. I know that people look at a birding trip, or some people will look at how they're choosing to go on a trip and say, like, whatever the maximum number of species I can see in a week is the trip I'm going to do. And you end up in, Colombia or Ecuador or whatever. And I, it everybody has some sort of max where they're just not going to retain every encounter that they have with every species that they see. And it's changing how I think about the trips that I do in those kinds of areas. In, say, Colombia, where I've led a lot of trips, I know that we're going to see a ton of birds. We're going to see a lot of really good birds. And there are next to no guarantees, of what species we're going to see versus, say, a Caribbean trip. Um, or an island trip where you have a set number of endemics and you might be trying to see every one of them. You have a list that you're checking off. And if you get through that, however many species that is, whatever else you see is kind of gravy for your trip. And the pressure's on the guide to deliver on that finite list versus having this huge list where there are so many possibilities and you're going to see a lot and you're just going to see how this time goes. I think about those trips differently, if that's making sense. But what I'm trying to do more and more as I repeat tours and as I'm making new itineraries and going to new places is making sure that the trip has those sort of elements where people get to learn, maybe make a little bit of their own discoveries. You're not just shuffled around being like, pointed in one direction and saying, here's this bird, here's this bird, here's this bird. Maybe you actually have some space to experience it on your own terms too. And those are the types of trips that I aim to lead and that I like the most.
Mm. I started to ask around a couple weeks ago. The the types of questions that that I'm bringing forward today, asking you all, and I was asking a number of different people that have been guides, but also that have been on guided trips. What are they really looking for in a guide and on a trip? And it was agreed upon that there's a certain baseline of competency when it comes to finding birds and identifying them. But there's so much more to it than that. And I think that I know that when I first got started, I thought it was all about just finding every single target bird in the most efficient order possible. And there are so many things that I was missing just because I just hadn't developed as a human being yet, or just like hadn't gone through the trial and error, and hadn't gotten that feedback over time that is so necessary to just make little gains here and there in the type of a guide that you are. And I'm wondering what you think. This is for all of you. What you think makes a guide great? What are people looking for when they hire somebody to take them around domestically or a foreign country and trust them to deliver on an experience that for some people may be something that they were saving up for years? And it's so much more than the ability to identify birds, as you know. That's sort of implicit or factored into it, but what other things come up for you think? What do you think, Alvaro? We'll start with you.
So I would simplify it down to emotional intelligence. Is that people who can actually deal with a lot of things going on where humans are involved, and also an experience is involved, and culture is involved, and kind of be able to mesh it all together in a way that's that works out for everybody. And when things aren't working out, have strategies to try to correct whatever situation might be happening. And it's not always logistics; it's sometimes people's kind of issues. I'm not going to specifically say anything. You don't have to. I think we all get the idea that you have let's say a van full or a bus full of folks in 2 weeks. Things happen.
You're going to get to know each other pretty well.
You're going to get to know each other pretty well, and to be able to navigate that and actually minimize any issues that might be there by seeing when things are happening or not happening, and sometimes that ability to just have emotional intelligence help you through that is key. And it's one of the reasons I think too that I think probably younger birders who get into this are often flummoxed by like, hey, I know all the birds. How come I'm getting bad reviews? So it's sort of like, which can happen. The opposite can happen too. You can have people who just have completely, from a young age, just know how to work a crowd. Somebody like Tom Johnson, he was like, probably as a kid could just, know the birds and know the people and know how to make it all work out.
Mm-hmm. I would even venture to say that at the end of a trip, people would probably be happier with a guide that maybe didn't know the birds that well, but could manage the group well, was attentive, set a good pace, made sure that people didn't feel left behind, rather than somebody who was just having the group bird their face off. I would say that the person who's,
and make them laugh too. Like that's the thing. It's a vacation. I mean, the classic. I don't. George, was it your comment from some tour that you heard of or something where the guide got really mad at the clients and said something like to the effect of like, come on, let's go. What do you think this is, a vacation? And it's like, well, yes,
right.
It's a vacation.
This is a baton. This is a baton death march. Didn't you understand? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's
God,
true.
miss the plot.
Yeah, exactly.
What about you, George? What do you think makes a a guide go from good to great?
Yeah, I agree with Al, and it's kind of what Mollee alluded to earlier, where the creating and fostering an experience part, because at the end, when people look back on their trip, you really want them to think that was fun. That was fun. I want to do that again. That was fun. Like, you're creating memories. And that is a delicate thing to do. And if you're not careful, you can create the wrong memories. And even just by not being attentive, you can create the wrong memories. What you want to do is you want, at the end of it, you want to think, okay, we sent folks home happy. They had a good time. They want to do it again. Hopefully they can do it again. Sometimes you realize on a trip that this might be your last trip with somebody. Maybe, their life is going to get more complicated somehow, or maybe physically they are not going to be able to do it much longer. And you wonder that makes you appreciate, especially if you've traveled with somebody a lot, you think about that. And, because, let's be honest, nobody gets in to do this for the money, right? Like, it's not a business typically where people really become uber wealthy. People do it because you like being outside. You like being with other people who like being outside. That's usually the people that stay with it. And if you're an ace birder, that's great. Sort of, like I was saying, I guess each of us have been saying that, I have people approach me sometimes and be like, well, I really know these birds and da-da-da-da-da, as though that is going to be a selling point for why they would be a good guide in an area. And I'm like, honestly, there's a ton of people out there that, and more all the time, that really, really, really know the birds. But can you take care of a group of people? Can you make them happy? Can you make them feel heard? Can you make them feel like if, the shit hits the fan, that they're there, they've got someone there that's going to be vouching for them and pulling for them. So I think that's what can put some folks into a different level, is what Al was saying. The emotional intelligence really is a key thing.
There's just a quick note. There are guides out there that really are guiding because they want to see new birds themselves. And that is often a recipe for
trouble.
They could be good. They could be very good in the field, and they could be very good for certain types of clients. But it's not a person that might work well with a wide variety of birding folks, I would say.
It sounds like that might be somebody who would be good for a private tour when the client and that person are on the same page, but maybe not going to work out for the majority of the tour. And in my asking around, that did come up when people feel like this was a way for the trip leader to get new birds or work on their personal lists, whether they be state or county, hemisphere, year, so on. They were pretty dissatisfied. And what I've learned is that people have a lot of acceptance and tolerance and understanding that we can't predict or control the weather. We expect to miss targets. Wildlife can be difficult, but there's a lot less tolerance for poor communication and lack of effort. And when the guide's incentives are different from what people signed up for, those are the things that people really have a tough time with. Which comes down to that emotional intelligence, right? Like you're doing this for the satisfaction, the well-being of the people, but also to have fun and connect with them and get to see that landscape and that culture for what it is. And the birds are kind of obviously a big part of it, but not why everyone is typically there, or at least what they're going to remember and enjoy moving forward. So, yeah, how about you, Mollee? What are you thinking here? I'm sure it's along the same lines, but maybe something stands out.
Yeah, it is. And I'm realizing that we haven't really spent time talking about the nuts and bolts of what goes into being a guide on particularly multi-day tours. So it's not only the the planning of the itinerary beforehand, and maybe you have, different levels of support in that, and it's doing all the bookings, figuring out everything down to the minute, and figuring out your plan Bs, looking at your target birds, making sure you have your backup plans to make sure that you get them out, as you said, in the most efficient manner, organizing a group, organizing the payments, and then actually getting to where you're going, preparing whatever you need to do for meals and vehicles, waking up, having the water stocked in the van, making sure everyone gets there on time, has their gear, goes out for the day. You come and you manage all the stops that you make, and you're changing as birds, are seen or not seen, or as obstacles come up on the road, or as rain comes in, and all those things. And then you get enough sleep so that you can safely repeat that for the next day. Like we could spend the whole hour talking about all that. So the challenge of having that emotional intelligence, problem solving skills, critical thinking while you're managing a group of people and making sure that those are not things that they are worried about is intense in the best of ways. It is a lot of pressure, and handling that, I think, is really important too. So just to throw out, what a typical day is like for a guide, that you're probably working on some level for multiple trips at the same time as you're wherever and all that too. The other thing that I've been thinking about as y'all have been talking is that what makes someone a great guide for one client doesn't make them a great guide for every client. And in my sort of personal journey of sorting out, that I wanted to do this full time as a career and pursuing it over the past several years that I've kind of been tiptoeing into it, has been the revelation that I can lead trips in the way that I want to, and in ways that genuinely make me happy and feel passionate and fueled, and like it's something that I would do for years on end. And that the clients who like that style of trips will find me if I communicate it well. And um, I've the more specific that I can be in describing a tour to a potential client and then delivering on that, I think the better, because people get what they're expecting. And there's a bit of a camaraderie around that too. And I think that's been really fun and liberating for me, and really figuring out that there can be different kinds of trips. Even if they're all going to the same place, different people and guides and companies can have trips that look different and are for a different type of client. I've found that really liberating and really wonderful. And the more that I feel like I kind of push that a little bit and create something that's more unique, the better. And I think that birding is at a really exciting place because there's people enjoying birding in so many different ways that there's room for a lot of diversity in how trips are led too. So if you find a guide that has a style of tour or birding experience that you like, then you can stick with them and trust that you're going to have those themes or that kind of core essence of the trip that's the same across multiple destinations. And that's a great thing too.
Yeah, it sounds like the days of just the formula of going to more or less the same places and having a similar itinerary as other groups are kind of over, just because birding is booming. And as more people get into it, they have different reasons that they are birding. They have different things that they want out of it. They may not be list focused, or it's less emphasized at least. And people definitely want to know what they're being marketed to and what that trip is going to be like in real life. And when there's a mismatch there, people can be kind of unhappy. So it's pretty awesome that you've been able to like really be super detailed on finding a pace and a trip that works for you, and then going out and finding the people that are also wanting that type of trip and experience with you. I'm sure it's working out really well. And things sometimes don't go according to plan out there. Sometimes there's weather. Sometimes things are happening politically. We can't predict these things. George was just in India and told me a little bit about a as of course our climate is changing, weather is a little less predictable, a lot more rain in the Himalayas than one might have anticipated just a few years ago. And I'm wondering how you all pivot on a trip. How are you psychologically, dealing with a trip that is maybe not going awry, but is throwing you some curveballs. Maybe not just one, or maybe a big curveball. Maybe it can be, something's happening with a client, a guest, a vendor, a partner, or just a place is inaccessible. How are you going about that stuff? Is it important to have a plan B or a plan C as a guide? George, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, I guess I'll start by saying that I would look at a tour that is going really well. And to me, one of the things I have tried to get into practice, and one of our old mentors that Alvaro and I had, Peggy Watson, kind of helped me get this idea kind of drilled into my head, which was that if a tour seems perfect, that's great, but there's probably ways to improve it. And as soon as you start, I think, looking at a tour that maybe you've done 3 or 4 or 5 times, whatever, you should always be looking for ways to improve it. Because I think that also means that when you're on a tour and maybe the first hints of stuff are starting to go wrong, that you are pretty tuned in to starting to try to head stuff off at the pass. In a way, I feel like we're weather forecasters. I would say being a guide, you're like part football coach, you're part bartender, you're janitor, you're a psychiatrist. No job is too big or too small. You can be sitting next to, a highly, elected official at dinner one night, and then, cleaning up dog poop in front of one of your, guests' hotel room in the same hour. Like that's the breadth of your experience often. If if it's hard to forecast stuff. It is, but I think if you can try to get into the habit of like, if I'm gambling, where are the problems going to be, and trying to do that ahead of time, you put yourself in a better position. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have a specific answer to your question, only that I've tried to get in the habit of forecasting and thinking about where stuff could go wrong and trying to have alternative ideas in place so that when stuff does go wrong, you can pivot, because you never really know how you're going to have to pivot. Sometimes going into a tour, you can be like, okay, this is a pinch point. Like, this is a spot where things could go wrong and you got to be ready. And those can be pretty obvious sometimes, but other times you don't know. Anyway, I don't want to go on too long, and I feel like I didn't really answer your question.
No, I think you did. I think it's just sort of a different way to approach the same problem. Things are going to go wrong, but the more you look at refining the trip as time goes on, the more the logistics of it and all the things that fit within those logistics. Alvaro, do you do something similar? Are you constantly, maybe not constantly, but are you often looking at where you're at on the trip and then doing some forecasting, some risk assessment based off of weather or other events that are probably out of your control? Or are you generally just gonna go for it?
I'm I feel like I've gotten into the overall, through experience, things just always work out. Even when you think stuff is not working out like right today, by the end of the trip, you've sort of sorted it all out, and it all kind of um, comes into like this nice package. I mean, for the most part, there's some things that can really sometimes go wrong that are just beyond what you can, even plan for. But I mean, actually, I've been lucky so far. I mean, most of these things don't, everything sort of does work out. Even when, we had a trip, man, it was a Chile trip a couple of years ago where we had Chile, Argentina. We had to cross the Andes on, we do it by land, and it's a beautiful crossing and so forth. And then I realized the weather got really bad and the crossing was going to be closed. then I thought, well, how are we going to get ourselves to the other country? And I mean, essentially, as I started seeing this develop, I just got on the online, bought all the tickets that were available to get us, to Argentina. It meant we had to like drive several hours to the airport, get ourselves on a plane, fly over, cost a bunch of money. But in the end, everybody had a great time. And I will not worry about, I mean, at the time it's stressful. You've got all these moving parts as you're on the bus, you're sort of still, worried that it's not going to work out. Yet it works out. Everybody goes home and later says, I can't believe you actually pulled that off. And you're like, well, if you sort of have the attitude of it will work out, it often does. And maybe it's something that that I might not have been able to pull off when I was younger because I would have been just much more stressed out about things. I would have been, on the phone to somebody else, at the office or something. And, can we do this? Can we do that? But in this case, I can just do it all myself since I run the company or, it's a small company, and whatever cost we have to eat is just part of the game, and I don't worry about it. And I don't even think about that. Whatever, thousands of dollars can suddenly evaporate, but you just have to make sure that the trip goes and people have a good time. So that's what I would say. Uh, it's not for everyone because that level of on the go thing, some people would just crack. So,
Yeah, that I could see myself being under stress at times. I like to think that I can let go and go with the flow and believe that things work out and have a sense of humor along the way. But you're a special person, Alvaro. Mollee, are you able to navigate those types of things with the same level of zen as Al? Or
Yeah,
do you have other
I
ways to
am.
manage these things?
I would say that I'm in the same boat, and yet again, I like keep going back to this, and I know I said the first tour I helped with was 11 years ago, but I'm just a few years in. This is really my second calendar year where I have a full-time guiding schedule, and another thing, if you're someone who's considering being a birding guide, is that you are planning this stuff years out, like many years out in some cases. So when I was looking, kind of coming out of the pandemic and thinking, like, I would really want to pursue this, I gave myself a few years of kind of transitioning into leading more and more tours to see if I felt like I was cut out for it, if it's something that I would like to do. And a lot of that at that point was figuring out how to take care of myself on these trips,
Mhm.
um, both just from the physical and mental and emotional taxes that as much travel as this is takes on a person, but also that I can still then, do my job well. So a lot of that has been really taking care of my mental health to
Mm.
make sure that I do stay calm in stressful circumstances and that I don't feel like that pressure is too much for me. And it is something that I have both worked on, and I guess I can say that I've worked on that a lot in life, in general too. And I feel really comfortable with that now. And there are plenty of experiences when you're leading trips to challenge that. So I can say that I have that, checked frequently as something that, yep, I'm good. I can handle this, and I can tell people to trust me and mean it. That I feel good in those situations. And the other thing that just helps with setting a group mentality the right way from the get go, and not saying that nothing is going to go wrong, but that, you're in good hands and we're going to do what we can, and whatever comes up, we're going to navigate it, is that sometimes the experiences where something kind of goes wrong turns out to be one of the coolest moments of a tour. And or the most memorable, and sometimes for good reason. Things that happen that are unexpected can create really special memories. So if that's the case, all the better.
I think you have to like
Fingers crossed.
uncertainty a little bit, don't you?
Yeah.
And like there's so much uncertainty already in nature. There's already uncertainty with travel, and you combine the two, and then put 10 or 12 people that are complete strangers in the same place, that all have different life experiences, are all going through different things at a certain time, have different ways of managing them. You have to be okay with the uncertainty.
Yeah.
And
Embrace it
that
even. Yeah.
lean in,
Mhm.
yeah, lean in. And that self-care piece is probably the highest leverage thing you can do to be emotionally aware and regulated during a trip. And to Alvaro's point way earlier, that emotional intelligence, I think that if you're burnt out and stressed and not sleeping well, and you have a couple bad habits that you're cultivating to cope with that stuff, you're not going to have the smoothest trip. And sometimes guests will pick up on that and they'll let you know that. Sometimes it doesn't, and you know better for it. So I think that's a really powerful thing that you brought up there. I know that as I have taken that more seriously, I think that I have become a more complete guide because I'm a more complete human being and adult, really, which has nothing to do with the birding skill. It's just sort of like secondary. So, as we're getting kind of close to the end here, I would love to know what advice you would give to a younger self when you started out as a bird guide, and what you would tell yourself. Just, it can be really short, couple sentences, and then yeah, I think that's all I got for you. George, you ready? You
Sure.
look kind of
Yeah.
eager. Yeah, or maybe that's your thinking face. What do you got?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, yeah, I have a couple thoughts. One is that I think to guide a good trip, um, it's best if you're excited to go to the place that you're going to. There are a few times where I've ended up doing a trip where I wasn't actually thrilled about the place I was going, or maybe, yeah, and that could be for several reasons. But generally, I think when planning a trip, if the guide is excited to go, and um, then they're going to convey that energy of excitement. Obviously, the emotional intelligence part is very key. So we don't want the guide to be so excited about what they're seeing that they're not actually paying attention to anybody else. But I think a guide that is excited about the place they're going and excited to share that place is a very good thing. And also that, as we alluded to before, generally, I prefer not to send folks home feeling as though they need a vacation after their vacation. I think if you can send folks home feeling, try to schedule in some unstructured time here and there, or if you don't have it scheduled, to try to find it, because group travel, especially if you're talking about a trip that's over a week or 2 weeks or whatever, it can be tough to get a moment to breathe, collect your thoughts, think about where you are, and kind of be present. If you give folks, an hour or two at some point here and there, it allows them to breathe and think and collect themselves and think about the experience. So I think you may not be able to do that every day. It might not be advisable to do that every day, but finding time to do that is really good. Yeah.
No vacations needed after the vacation is over. That is a really great nugget there, George. Mollee, what would you tell your younger self?
Sure. Well, hopefully this isn't too cheesy, but it's no secret that there aren't a lot of women who are guiding. There are not many women in their 30s who are guiding full time. So there have been a lot of challenges with that, and I've just kind of come into this in a fairly atypical way where I've been with a lot of really experienced world class birding guides in a lot of different situations over the years. And I have just had to become comfortable with not having all the answers, with being okay with what I don't know, um, learning out loud with a group and embracing that, and not striving for perfection because there is no such thing in this field, but just that, kind of embracing the authenticity of learning out loud, and that it's always okay to not have all the answers, and that that can actually maybe be a plus to your clients if you can relate to them with where they are and that you're in a learning journey too. Then I think that those are all really good things. And it's taken me, I mean, it's something I work on every single day is, being okay with what I don't know and being wrong and just always striving to improve and enjoying that journey. So I think there are a whole lot of specifics that we could all go into on how to improve your guiding skills, but I have found that to be really important for myself.
That's really amazing to hear, especially because oftentimes humility, and that's what you're describing to me. That's how I'm taking it, is there's this humility that you bring into it that oftentimes is missing from those that do have a lot of those answers. Not that there aren't incredibly talented and humble lifelong learners who are, accessible and just self-aware. Those people definitely exist too, but bird long enough and you'll run into the people that know everything and make sure that you know it. And those people are tough to be around on a tour. So I think that humility is like, that's a really good nugget there as well. Thank you for sharing. All right, Alvaro, bring us home.
So I think I have to go back to a time when I had to make this really concerted choice. I was going to go and either try to be an academic or do birding and guiding as my job. It's going to be one or the other. And at the time when I chose guiding, I was kind of sad, like this sadness of like all of these things I thought that I was going to do, publish papers and, do all this, science and sort of figure out how the world works. I just wasn't going to be able to do that. And now I can see that the freedom I've had being a guide and maintaining my interest in all the scientific world, I've actually probably published way more than I thought I would. And I've actually done both. And I'm obviously not a full-time scientist. I'm a hobby scientist, but I get a lot of pleasure out of having this time that I can work my other part of my brain and do things that I learn in the field while touring and actually come up with projects and team with other people and get publications done. And I never thought that that would have been even possible. So I would say to my younger self in that point in time, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. It's like just, what you're interested in, go with what you're interested. Let the passion lead you as you always have done. I'd always did that. I mean, foolishly so. And it does actually kind of work out is one of the things that I would tell myself. That doesn't have anything to do with guiding. It's much more of a personal note to myself of like these, thinking about that time. There you go.
Excellent. And another thing where you're just trusting the process that if you enjoy what you're doing, it's all going to work out in the end. Things have a way of doing that. Well, thank you to the three of you for indulging me and answering some of those questions. I hope that was really interesting or will be interesting to some of your listeners. And hopefully I can be on again for something in the future. If not, I hope to see you around. Thank you again for having me here.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, this was your your second time around, and this is a conversation I felt like we needed to have. So thanks for bringing it here.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you. Pleasure's all mine.
All right, guys. Well, I guess we ought to scoot. We'll be back again soon with another episode of Life List, a birding podcast. See ya around, everybody.
See you, folks.
Bye-bye.